So hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So I have Olympia here with us again, and we are going to be completing our discussion on Enneagram types and mental health, as well as self-development. So it was a continuation from a previous time when we did Enneagrams 4, 2, and 1. I think, did we do any more of that, like other than those? I think it was 4, 2, 1 that was the focus.
Mostly, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so now we are going to be doing on anagrams 5 and 8. And regarding anagrams 3 and 6, you can head over to Olympia's channel for a discussion on that. And before we start, just a reminder that I do have an upgraded version of personality themed merchandise that you can check out in the description box below. And so we are going to be starting with anagram 5 and some of the strengths and weaknesses, as well as the potential pitfalls of this type. So Olympia, what are your understanding of, what are some of the strengths, as well as usually like things that Enneagram 5 tend to be a little bit, they need to be a bit more careful about. Yeah.
When I think of 5, I think a lot of people, when they think of 5, they think of a scholar in some way. Like, it really goes deeply into the subject, and yeah, it can become their whole life sometimes. They tend to be more secluded, withdrawn. Once again, this is like the average unhealthy 5. They can also, I also talk about that on my channel before. I think they can develop some kind of arrogance around their knowledge. So because the 5 gains some sense of security by acquiring knowledge or understanding the world, when all their security is based on that, it can become a bit of an ego, and then they can become a bit arrogant in that way. And that can, of course, be a problem when they interact with other people. And also sometimes what the 5 can have a problem with is they might think they know best and they know everything about the subject, and but at the end of the day, no one does. So their view on the world might actually not be close to reality sometimes. Like they just think so. They just think, okay, I know what it is, and um, a lot of 5s. I mean, like I said, I'm talking of core 5. They often lack also experience with the world when they're unhealthy. Like they often will isolate themselves and not really engage much with the world. So like a stereotypical introvert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but like more on the secluded side.
Yeah.
Yeah, so interestingly, because I'm actually a social instinct 5, so a lot of people don't see me as a 5 because I care about like finding a sense of belonging by through social interactions.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So it can be a bit confusing. Like I have viewers asking me, "Are you still a 5?" Yeah, I am. Actually, yes, I do place a lot of my value on intellect. And interestingly, because I was actually having a conversation with my friend the other day, and she was like, she's actually interested in the idea of people teaching her. Like she likes being taught. And I was like, you know what? I actually prefer doing the teaching.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was like, yeah, actually that's quite an Enneagram 5 thing, right? So yeah, I like teaching, but not like I have toned down a lot. So I don't mean it in a condescending way, like trying to prove myself. But I do like the idea of sharing knowledge, and because I do tend to delve deep into a topic, and I try to always look on both sides of the issue before having an opinion. And I think I kind of inherited the Enneagram 5 from my dad, who is an INTP Enneagram 5. Not sure about his wing, but he does have that secluded problem because he's not a social instinct. And that's definitely that lack of you know, having the real life experience, because a lot of his life revolves around research and
Mm.
also, you know, being a professor. I think being a professor is a very Enneagram 5
Yeah.
occupation, and it is one of the, you know, occupations that I considered. But because of my social instinct, I feel like I also kind of like having, you know, a lot of variation in terms of interactions. So yeah, I'm still considering that, like, in terms of, you know, one of the potentials. um I think Enneagram 5 definitely has that issue of, you know, sometimes being frustrated, because Enneagram 5 does take a lot, like invest a lot of time in understanding issues. And sometimes, you know, when we meet people who are like, you know, forming an opinion, and they may not have, you know, in our opinion, like delved deep enough in the issue. Like, we can sometimes be like annoyed, because it's like you're just throwing your opinion out, but it's not like well informed. I think that's a lot of times I have that frustration. But over time, I think I try to like tone it down, because I do realize that I just have to accept that, you know, people all have different priorities in life, and, you know, not everyone's priority is understanding both sides of the issue. In fact, many people's priority is really just, um, you know, getting on the trend, or they might have just reacted in the moment, which is like a very like common thing. And also, I agree that, you know, Enneagram 5 is not always right about anything. It is a very human trait to be wrong. And I think that Enneagram 5, once we can accept that I mean, I fully accepted that, because I guess because I'm also an NF type, like I'm an INFJ. I think sometimes the NT types of Enneagram 5 tend to be a little stronger in terms of their opinions, because they have like the T before F. Um, so they can kind of bulldoze a little bit. Um, but yeah, at the end of the day, it's really like acknowledging that we can all be wrong in some cases. And because from what I see, is like, yes, I am very confident of my own opinions usually, but if I do see evidence that is new and interesting and, you know, has a different perspective, I would definitely consider changing my opinion, because it's not like set in stone. Like, that's it's not an ideology. Like, updating ourselves regularly is sort of like necessary. And yeah, sometimes, you know, sometimes the arrogance is deserved, but sometimes it's not. So yeah, it's like sometimes I'm also wrong, and I'm like, why was I so sure of myself back then? That's actually not how I see it anymore, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Perspectives on issues change all the time. So yeah, I think it's like striking a balance, and also obviously, you know, on the social side of things, being more engaging with just like emotional. I mean, for the NT types, I think with Enneagram 5, it's also like the emotional intelligence, you know, understanding how people work as well, in addition to the theoretical knowledge. Yeah.
yeah. I think actually, I think a lot of personality type theory stuff, especially in socionics, was probably created by fives, or a lot of fives go deep
Yeah,
into it.
true. No wonder
So,
I'm so interested.
so it's funny, they do try to understand people, but
Yeah.
then
Okay.
for the unhealthy average five, then it's really important to actually go out there and actually also interact with those people, and that can be a
Yeah,
challenge,
exactly. Yeah.
especially for the NTs. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they find it difficult, so they often try to intellectualize it in order to be able to deal with it. That's what five often does. They, on some level, often feel like they need to intellectualize something
Mm-hmm.
before they can, so they feel safer in the world. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's not always the case.
Yeah. And I think that's also why a lot of people confuse me with INTJs, which obviously I don't really I don't use FITE, but people have also confused me with TI, like it's like being an anti type, but my FE is stronger. Yeah, it's because of the Enneagram 5 that can get people confused because they don't understand that Enneagram can play a huge role in our interest. So sometimes you see that with the reverse with like certain anti-types, they have like a more feeling Enneagram type, like an Enneagram 4 INTJ, and then people sometimes assume they are INFP. So it's like that confusion. Just like a something to be aware of when when looking at functions and Enneagram type. I think Enneagram type is more of your temperament and your interests. Um, that's how I define it. Like, what are you more focused on? Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I I mean, it kind of depends on. So I know. Okay, so I don't know how much you do do any tri type or trifix stuff? Do you
Yeah,
use
I
that?
did, but I don't really remember mine because it was like a while back. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think so it's possible. Okay, so some people think it's not. It doesn't matter. Only your core type matters. But I think even if someone doesn't believe in trifix or tri-type, we all have still a connection to certain aspects of the other Enneagram types. Simply because we are human, we just,
Yeah.
based on our personality, are more attached to like one,
Mhm.
but we still can have like a connection to the other types. So I was also thinking, I mean, so I don't think I'm a 5, but I think I have like a 5 fix or like a connection to 5. So I also had like some struggles with type 4 stuff, type 5 stuff, like yeah, also not never like always thinking I'm always right or something like that. Like I always know and whatever in one specific field. To be honest, was actually with type stuff.
Right.
So the funny thing was, I know, I mean, I know like my boyfriend told me maybe you should overthink this a bit, and then I was like, no, I'm good. And then there was like a very old YouTube video. I don't want anyone to look for it, but there's like a very old YouTube video where I was giving an interview and I said something and I realized I don't believe this at all anymore. Like I'm actually I
Yeah,
totally
yeah.
shifted
Uh-huh.
my thoughts on this and then I was like, wow, okay, so this really shows I'm sometimes wrong or I change my thoughts and that's
Yeah,
okay.
and people should be proud of that. Yeah, like we live in an age where, everyone sort of, I mean, not saying only Enneagram 5, but it's like everyone is trying to be right all the time because of social media. And
Oh,
sometimes I also like look back in embarrassment of like certain past arguments I had. And I'm like, no, I don't
yeah,
believe in that anymore.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah, so I try not to engage in those things anymore because it may not even be the final opinion. I mean, I don't think that is the final one. Yeah. So
so
um, yeah, it's really interesting. And even if you do a lot of research, sometimes you don't see the whole picture. That's just reality. Like, people say, a lot of this slogans I would like to say on social media. You say like, oh, stay informed, but like, are you really informed? Because a lot of the sources you look at is biased. Like,
yeah.
you are not able to see the whole picture. I think you can only try, but there's really too much out there. Like for me, I was surprised by many things that I thought was like I already did enough research. No, there's more. Like there's always more. And a lot of times it's the things that you're exposed to is like not enough. Like from school, from even the internet, like no, because there's an algorithm and you're not able to see a lot of things from that. So it's just, not just for Enneagram 5s, but like for even other Enneagram types, I would say like don't be absolutely sure of what you know. Um, always be open to, changing your mind if there is something different coming up.
Yeah, I would also just add as a side note, it's probably 5-wing 4 who would have that issue the most. I mean, depends, but 5-wing 6 tends to be a bit more, I mean, because of the 6, a bit more self-doubting. So they tend to question what they believe a bit more. So with 5-wing 4, it can be really a lot of ego involved, I would say. So yeah.
Yeah. I think honestly, I mean, maybe it's just me speaking up for my own type, but I think it's more of an in the moment thing because Enneagram fives are, at the end of the day, the the pride or whatever the identity is based on intellectual understanding. So like it's like anything that can expand our understanding, like I'm quite welcoming. But as long as there is like evidence and a convincing argument or like something interesting pops up, then I would definitely be open to it. Like even in the past when I was being really stubborn, like if someone actually say something that make me reflect, then I would actually change on the spot. But I think it's more of in the moment when the ego is being affected. Like that's when yeah, I agree that there can be this like note of stubbornness, but I think we can quickly move past that when we do see things that convince us otherwise, because there is this desire to expand our like knowledge and understanding on the subjects we are interested in. So yeah, so that's like our goal, I would say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like true understanding. With 5, the true understanding doesn't just come from thinking you know best. Like you actually have to get in touch with the world. Yeah, either through
Yes, I agree
evidence
with that
or
completely. Yeah.
yeah.
And that's where, with like NTP, NFP types that are 5.4, they have to be especially careful because they don't have SE. In fact, I do see sometimes the INFP, especially, they have a SE blind spot, right? And they tend to, then they are also like the more emotional fives, which is sounds ironic, but like they are both emotional and Enneagram 5. So sometimes they can get really stuck on like a certain issue because of the FI and Enneagram 5 Wing 4 combination. Um, and they don't have the SE to motivate them to really find the answers outside.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's just something to take note of, because when you actually talk to people and you hear from them, it's very different from like a theoretical understanding of something.
Yeah. Yeah, basically, yeah. And unless you really try to use the knowledge of the theory, it's not really true knowledge. Usually, I mean, it depends, of course. Some subjects are very abstract, where cannot really do much with it per se, but still. And yeah, even with people who don't like SE, I mean, INFPs tend to like TE, right? So
Yeah, they can use that too
they
for
can
that.
try to be more in touch with that, or yeah, just interact with people, being an F type. So yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and also like just a one last thing, like even with like personality theories, there can be a lot of theories, for example, about compatibility and stuff, but in reality, there's a lot more to a person than their type. I mean, obviously, the compatibility theories, there is some truth to it. Like I always do see that in real life as well, but then there's also like other things that people find attractive. So it is like theory, but it's also like real life. And that kind of forms the full picture. Yeah. So okay, let's move on to Enneagram 8. So let's talk about the strengths associated with Enneagram 8, as well as some of the potential pitfalls that they have to be aware of. Yeah.
Okay. Should I start? Okay.
Sure.
Um, yeah. When I The first thing I think when I think of eight is like the bull in the china shop. Do you know that expression? Like
Yep.
like a bulldozer. Just they have that tendency to kind of, especially if they're like an ESTP or something, go
Or
full force.
ENTJ.
Yeah. So the good thing about eight is when they really use their power, they can be very assertive, and
Mhm.
they often get into leadership positions, CEO positions. They get things done. They they really follow what they want. Like eights being like a assertive type and kind of like an it type, they often just go for what they want, and other types can struggle with that a lot. They don't know what they want, or they don't go for it, whereas eight just goes for it. Of course, the downside can be if it's like not a good thing for them, it can be destructive, or they might destroy other people in the process, or they can also be quite power hungry, and then they
Yeah.
can use their power. So these are like the issues with eight. Yeah.
Yeah, so Enneagram 8, it's very interesting because, obviously, like with power comes responsibility,
Yeah,
and 8
exactly.
has a lot of responsibility on your hands. And I'm like, when you talk about mental health and self development, I really think that 8s should listen up because
Yeah.
not that they would ever like listen to my instruction, but this is my personal opinion. But it's because they have so much influence, right? Like a lot of there's a lot of eights in politics. There's a lot of eights in the corporate world, like usually leaders. And so, if you think about it, like a leader's opinions and decisions impact like nations, and I mean, of course, on the smaller scale, it's like whole companies, but still there is like a few thousand people impacted by their decisions every day. And I feel like it would be really beneficial um, for AIDS to be healthy because it just affects so many people health levels as well, since it's like a chain effect. um, and definitely I agree that AIDS have a lot of drive, and obviously that's something that some other personality types, I mean, Enneagram types may struggle with, like Enneagram 9 is famous for having a bit of issue with that problem. I mean, in that subject, and I think eights, they don't have an issue. The thing is, they don't have an issue um, clearing obstacles in your way, which can be both a good and bad thing,
Mhm.
because it's like the end justifies the means. So whatever they have to sacrifice, that's why you see a lot of politicians make decisions. It's very Enneagram 8 behavior. A lot of these politicians, I don't want to be too obvious in my reference to recent current events, but a lot of politicians do that. I mean, like in general, just not just from one country, but in like I think
Yeah.
many countries, they do that because it's like they have like certain goals and interests at stake. And I'm not like fully dismissing their reasons for doing things, but a lot of times they can make decisions that are going to affect a lot of people, and they are very willing to sacrifice many people to achieve whatever that they want. And again, from different people's perspectives, that can be sometimes good and sometimes really destructive. So, if you think about it in a company setting, obviously there are this like C-suite personality that a lot of people talk about, that they are willing to sacrifice, um, you know, um, for like the short term to gain long term goals. And sometimes it actually is not that great as well in the long run, because people are realizing that when you get the results short term, but you neglect, let's say, employees, um, in the long run, it may not actually be beneficial to your company either, because they are the ones holding up the company, and
Yeah.
sharing their progress. So sometimes it can lead to like people just having this like mass um, migration. I mean, not like actual migration, but like just them leaving, and that
Oh
can
yeah.
increase progress. So I think with politics is the same thing. Like there's a lot of these decisions that are made that may or may not be warranted, and it can be very heavily debatable by many people. But because Enneagram 8s have such a strong drive, they are really willing to sacrifice a lot in the moment that a lot of other Enneagram types may be hesitant to do. And it can be seen as a very good, like, decisive move. But on the flip side, it can also have a lot of repercussions that are like, you know, um, have impact for generations and generations, and it
Yeah.
cannot be undone. So it's like the good and bad both are very strong and extreme. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I would also say, I mean, not even core types, but certainly also core type 8, but even people who have like just a connection to 8. A lot of them are in politics and or even military or big governments, big companies. Yeah, because they really like that power. They they are naturally drawn to those things for that reason. And like I said, with great power comes great responsibility. So yeah, I was also thinking, I mean, kind of why 8 tends to be in this position. They are usually extroverts, or at least very focused on the external. And I found that people who are more extroverted or have a more extroverted outlook tend to, if they are unhealthy, punish their environment more. Whereas people who
True.
are more withdrawn or more introverted, they tend to kind of punish themselves. Or
Yeah, Enneagram force.
yeah, with 4 it's like the stereotypical example, but even with 5 and
Yeah.
9 and just some other people as well, like it goes more internal. And yeah, with 8, obviously it's more destructive because they put it outside and they have a lot of power. So yeah, I found it
Yeah.
amusing when you said, yeah, they should really listen and they should go to therapy or something. Because it's true. It's true. Um, and yeah, the funny thing is they usually don't want to. Obviously, the thing
Yeah.
is, the issue is with 8. Um, they might do all, let's say, all these quote unquote bad things, and they still get ahead and they still succeed. So then they will think, why should I change? Like it works. So why should I do anything about this? But like you also said, usually it doesn't last forever. Like there's usually some kind of short-term component to it, and it could have something to do with them being often ECP, ECJ, sometimes even with ENTJ. Even though they have NI, they still mostly use TE usually.
Hmm.
So they still can kind of forget about it sometimes. So yeah, usually they go with a bang as well. They come with a bang, go with a bang.
Yeah.
um,
Very
so
dramatic people.
yeah, it's usually kind of dramatic when they fail in the end. So yeah, it's in the long run, it's probably better to change your methods, especially when someone has so much power or responsibility. People are going to get fed up at some point. Like at some point, they're just going to turn on you and try to assassinate you. Or okay, I'm not saying, and don't take it the wrong way, but yeah, it just happens, right?
Yeah.
Like in history, um, yeah, even with people who didn't not necessarily do anything wrong, they can get assassinated. So yeah, but anyway, so yeah, they really have to be careful with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure like a lot of Enneagram 8s are also aware at this point that there is like basically a time for everything. There's a time for maybe a more dramatic and decisive move, and there are also times for like a slower, patient, and strategic move. I mean, they do see themselves as strategic, I guess, but sometimes being soft is also being strategic. And it's not always power. It's not always related to force. There are also many, other types of approaches that can get them the things they want. And I think this is something that Enneagram 8s are aware of. I do know that a lot of them are actually trying to work on how to manage that. But it is tough for them because of the fact that they are, that their natural strength is seemingly more on the forceful side. Yeah. But I think, yeah, like they have to know how to be able to do both. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I said, it's a bit tricky for eight. They don't really like to go internally and kind of question themselves that much, or yeah, it's hard for them. It's even hard for them to really know. So so I said they usually know what they want, but the irony is at the same time they really don't, or they just act on a bit of an impulse in a way. Like they don't truly know what they truly want. They just go for what they instinctually want, if that makes sense. Like they don't really know what they really value or what is really good for them, or they often ignore that and they just do. And yeah, when you also said it can be good to be soft sometimes, I really remember this when I was talking with an eight, and they often say that eight doesn't like to have weakness, right? Or they always present themselves as like super strong and powerful. And I found that to be a weakness actually, because if you're not aware of your weak side, that's trouble, right? Like you need to know it. You need to. Sometimes you have to work on it. Sometimes you don't. Like it's also okay to have certain weaknesses. So, yeah, if they don't acknowledge that, it can be a big problem as well.
Yeah. And whether they like it or not is there.
Yeah.
So if you look at it like, I like to combine it with MBTI a little bit. So Enneagram 8s, I'm not saying that they can only be these types, but a lot of them do tend to be ESTP, ENTJ, ESTJ. And we know by personality functions that all of them have a, a weak, okay, not weak, but emotional um, like shadow side or weaker function. So, ENTJs, they can become like ISFP-ish in their weakness, and ESTJ can be like INF. They can feel like an INFP when they are powerless. I mean, when they are like in a place of vulnerability. And so that's the ironic part because it's always there, even if they don't want to admit it. And I think we did mention that like the defense mechanism of Enneagram 8 is denial. A lot of them do deny their weakness, but it's still there. So it's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to sort of be building up. And I do notice that Enneagram 8s tend to use anger as a cover of their weakness. So when they're angry, it can mean a lot of things. It can mean that they are actually sometimes, feeling the FI for ENTJ and ESTJs. And they
Yeah.
don't know how to express that in a healthy way. So they would rather, use anger as a cover. But it doesn't really work because the FI is still there. So that needs the attention actually.
Yeah, and it can be difficult for eights to do it by themselves, and there's really no harm in asking for help, or or just
I don't think they want to ask for help. So
no, they don't want to, but I really try. Yeah, I don't know, I try. Um, yeah, I mean, this is what I think. It's also kind of based on socionics, where we have certain weaknesses. That's just how we are, and
mhm,
we can learn from other people who are good at those things. So
exactly, yeah.
it's hard
Like they
to
can look at the FI dominant people. Yeah.
right. like you can look at them and they, maybe you are lucky and you have a friend who's FI lead or something, and they might be able to make you more aware of that shortcoming you have. That's just the
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah, and for ESTPs, they can look at like NFJs or, I mean, the Enneagram 8s ones anyway. I think some of the other Enneagram types are more in touch with your feelings anyway. Like, I think ESTP 7s are quite, I don't know, they are not, they don't really have a lot of issues with that. But I think Enneagram 8s definitely, they would, it would be very helpful for them to have like a feeling type around them. Yeah. And
Yeah.
not just around them, but they actually, have application of what they are doing right.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, maybe this is a bit more of a motivation. So the weaknesses we have, obviously, they are weak spots. So other people could hurt us in those areas, and it can be really good to have a friend, a partner, a family member, whatever, who's not too unhealthy and who has that weakness as a strength. So so you are prepared in case there's someone out there who tries to exploit that weakness. I mean, that's really reality. So maybe some aides will be more motivated by that, because it's. And I also notice a lot of aides, they overcompensate for their weakness. So they might not acknowledge directly that they have a weakness, but I don't know. Let's say an eight is like, I don't know, maybe that's a bad example, but they're like short or something, and they often get teased for that, or they have like some personality flaw. Maybe they, I don't know, they are a bit shy or insecure about something, and then other people make fun of that, and then they become like tyrants, like really, really hurting other people, like really abusing their power and everything. And they it would help everyone, and including themselves, if they just dealt with whatever was troubling them, like if it was an
Yeah.
insecurity or some negative trauma or feelings or whatever. That would really help a lot.
Yeah, it really does. And if you think about it, like, again with the Enneagram, I mean MBTI example, like an ESTP is going to, look like an INFJ when they are in their, stress state, or sometimes, they're in the weak moments or whatever. I mean, like grappling with the other side,
Mhm.
and with ESTJ is the INFP, so it really does come out. And if they don't address that and they use the TE or the stronger functions to cover, it just keep perpetuating, because whatever they are afraid of is actually going to become worse in a way, because a lot of times when people are insecure, they are afraid of being abandoned. But when they take the tyrannical approach, it quickens the abandonment. So,
Yeah.
and then it's like a loss. Yeah, I think I've heard of the story of an ESTJ who was like, my friend told me about it. Like, it's actually a female ESTJ, and she was like screaming in the office, and after that she regretted that and tried to like get people back, but it was too late. So that's like a prime example. Basically, it's like whatever she feared actually happened because she was not able to um, deal with her insecurities in an internal way. But she kind of used the anger as a cover.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I also think that eights or any Enneagram type, actually, the last, I don't know if it can be advice or whatever. Like, there's also a tendency that people, it's good to have a friend who has a certain strength that you don't have, and you kind of complement each other. But it's more important to try to integrate that into your own life. And I think sometimes people tend to use the other person as almost like a crutch, like, because they don't
Oh,
want to deal with, like they don't want to deal with your weakness. So like default to this person. So it can work both ways, right? Maybe, a more emotional Enneagram type can rely on the Enneagram 8s to like, oh, stand up for me, and they
Oh,
go and
okay, okay,
yeah,
yeah.
right. Like you see this dynamic pretty often, like, and then let's say the 9 just hide somewhere, and then the 8s is like unleashing the anger,
Oh,
and after
yeah.
that the 8 is like relying on the 9 to like deal with people. But that doesn't work in the long run either, because you have to deal with issues yourself most of the time. So you can't have that person just helping you do all that, because
Yeah.
you're going to accumulate all these problems. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's okay, yeah, it's not about becoming dependent on someone.
It's more
There
like
can
learning to use
Yeah,
it for yourself. Yeah.
right. I think that's really mostly it. I mean, yeah, to some extent they can help you in certain areas, but when it comes down to it, yes, you can get inspiration from them, you can learn from them, because for them it's natural and easier. So you need the awareness. Like you will usually lack the awareness in that area. It's harder to access it. So it it's easier to get inspiration from those people, and then you can implement it in your own life.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you, Olympia, for engaging this discussion. And once again, if you enjoyed this video, remember to like and subscribe. And we will see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.